Welcome to the Meru Media podcast with Mukunda Ravi.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Meru Media podcast today. And we're joined by Jodh Singh, who goes by the Twitter account name. What's your Twitter account name again?
It's a Jung Nihung.
Jung Nihung. And what does that mean exactly?
So Nihung is sort of a term used since the time of the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh. It's a Persian word, means crocodile, used to refer to Sikh warriors. And Jung means, I always thought of it meaning two things. One meaning like sort of idea of Jungian archetypes. The other sort of just Jung, meaning war.
Okay.
So, it just rhymed, sounded cool.
It does sound cool. It sounds really awesome. So, Jodh here is he's a younger guy. We did interview him on Round Pundits a couple months ago, actually a month ago maybe. But he is very deeply entrenched, knowledgeable, and committed to Sikh Dharma. And he practices it, talks about it, he addresses the current misunderstandings of both non-Sikhis and Sikhis have about their traditions. So Jodh, let's find out a little about yourself. Why don't you tell everyone kind of what your background is and how you came into really focusing on the tradition and history.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jodh Singh. I am an American, born and brought up here. My parents moved from India, and I guess I'm from a Sikh family. So I was kind of raised. So when I was younger, I wasn't really that religious. My parents weren't really religious at the time. But around, I think, when I was later in middle school, like my early teens, I guess, my parents started, they started getting more awareness, and they wanted us to learn a bit about our traditions.
Right.
So just started going to a Sikh school, learning a bit more about the traditions, particularly three fundamentals, which were Gurmat Sangeet, which is the sort of kirtan, how Sikh musicology, Boli, which is Punjabi, and also speaking Punjabi, and also the written script of Gurmukhi, and Virsa, which is sort of the history, or what we also refer to as Itihas. So these three things intersected, just discussions with my father, he's a big impact, and just, trying to learn a bit more, trying to go, because sometimes what you learn is very superficial level,
right.
Especially at the textbook level. Oh, you learn, okay, Sikhism is basically Hinduism plus Islam, right? And it's like, okay, you kind of realize that's very surface level, and you want to go deeper. And so you just ask these questions take you to more questions, and so on. So it's just a thing I've been doing as a hobbyist. Hopefully one day, so I work in a professional industry, but hopefully one day I'm able to pursue this more in a legitimate matter, I guess.
So when did you actually start going to Sikhi school, and what is like Sikhi school? How does that work? Is it like 5 days a week? Is it 1 day a week? And what's kind of the setup around that?
So that I started going when I was I think 8 actually, but I started getting really into it when I was 11.
Okay.
But so they have, the way ours is structured is it's a Saturday school. Usually there's Saturday school or a Sunday school. And they usually have either it's a building of their own. Ours was a building of its own. A lot of them are also buildings like where gurdwaras are.
Okay.
And, there's curriculums out there that basically have all these things structured. There's different grade levels. So we had like exams and homework assignments and like blocks. So one block was our Gurmat Sangeet, where you learn instruments, that kind of thing.
That's really cool, because I feel like that sort of setup is, which also in some ways explains to me why a lot of Sikhs that I've met are also very into the music. They can either play tabla or the harmonium. They have a sense of musical style that I find like a lot of Hindus don't have, right? But I think it's really interesting that not only do you learn a language, I'm assuming you learn both Gurmukhi and Punjabi, right?
Yeah. So to differentiate, technically, people think they're the same thing. Gurmukhi is the written script. Technically, Gurmukhi is used in Punjab to write written Punjabi.
Yeah.
But it's in the Sikh context, it can actually be used for any language. Usually it's used for Braj, Sanskrit. it's even used for Persian, Farsi. But yeah, and then we also learned like Punjabi. But I actually learned Punjabi more on my own. The school's focus was more on Gurmukhi because when
Okay.
you're reading the prayers or reciting from the scripture, basically for the purpose of reading that.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're like what, 24, right? 24, 25?
I'm 23.
23. Okay, so you're younger than I thought, which is really it's awesome. I mean, it's interesting to me because I think when I was 23, which was 17 years ago, internet had just kind of started coming out, and we maybe didn't have the necessary either the self-confidence, or I didn't have the self-confidence and or the ability to go out and just start talking about this stuff. And it's fascinating because you have a pretty big following on Twitter. You have a few thousand, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I mean, the ability to have that kind of impact and engage with your views, I think is not only. I mean, it has a certain level of. I mean, it's kind of weird because I feel like the social media gives both bravery and cowardice because it lets you expose and talk about your views like freely, openly, and with strength behind it. But at the same point, you get to hide behind a veneer in some sense, and some people wouldn't say the things that they say on social media to other people's faces or in polite company, so to speak. But I mean, what I see on yours is much more educational. It does take a lot, I think, to come out and state your views and engage in a dialogue about it. How have you found that experience, and why did you decide to start like make the focus of your Twitter to be like on Sikhi history and Dharm?
Yeah, it's a good question. Twitter is an interesting platform because I think the greatest thing and the worst thing about Twitter is that it's very open, right? Like on an Instagram post or a Facebook post, it's your curated circle, and you can delete a comment if you don't like it. On Twitter, you're out in the wild. So I think what I found useful was just through interacting with Twitter, like I think even the perspective I was given in my Gurdwara, my Sikh school, it was a very specific perspective. And then like you go to another place, a very specific perspective. Through Twitter, I was able to sort of interact with people from all over the world, different religious backgrounds. So it taught a lot about some things, right? We learn, and some of these things I know, like my dad always taught me, because he lived in India and he had a very rich experience there too, from moving around different places. But so Singh, a lot of Sikhs they think Singh is like originally a Sikh name, but it originally there's a lot of different, warrior groups in India that use Singh. It originally came with the Rajputs. And so that's something that you wouldn't know unless if you just stayed in your little bubble, you'd kind of, you wouldn't be exposed to that history. And
right.
So
that's right. Because even, Singh comes from Simha, right?
Yeah.
So it's and many of the people before even the Rajputs, would have the name like Simha as part of their name. Like, you'd have big Narasimha Pallava in South India, and there's a few people in North India that keep the name Simha as kind of like this warrior lion kind of thing. And I think that tradition continued with the Rajputs and the Sikhs.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that was the one thing that I really liked about Twitter. Sometimes it's getting a bit unwieldy now because people, it's just like, I think once like at a bigger following, there's just like so many aspersions cast, like, oh, this is the real motive, and that's the only reason really I stay anonymous, is because my real life, my friends in real life, they don't really know about all this.
Sure.
Because I don't really discuss with them.
Why not?
Their interests are not really aligned.
Okay.
I guess maybe like a few I discuss with, and like it's just most of my friends, my circle, even my Sikh friends, their interests are sort of elsewhere.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a thing where, I just like keeping them separate. And so, and also because there's also, like I said, at that big of a following, that's why I was joking. Like there's some people call me an ISI agent. Some people call me a BJP IT cell. Some people have said I'm sitting in India. Some people have said, like, I was like, if I got paid by all these parties for doing all these things, like I would love that.
Right. You wouldn't have to have a day job.
Yeah, exactly. But so I mean that's the one thing. But yeah, I do like Twitter. I mean, I think it has its uses, and I think the one thing that now I'm kind of realizing is that sometimes it's good as a networking tool, but then some of the actual conversations are best held through other mediums, which is, podcasts and articles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But
I agree. I mean, Twitter's great to build something and give little tidbits, but you can't really have. I haven't. Plus, I'm not a very big person on Twitter, either on my personal side or through Meru. I just kind of use it to shoot out stuff. I don't have a very good following. I don't really care, but it's just I find it like it's better to do podcasts or conversations because you're able to really get your point out without having interruption necessarily and or aspersions, like you said, thrown at you because the context is full, hopefully, in the podcast. So I guess by getting into the meat of what we want to talk about is where and how and in what milieu kind of did Sikhism start, and what like most people would know, it starts with Guru Nanak, and in somewhat in this Guru sense, it ends with Gobind, but the continuation continues with the Granth Sahib. But how does the Dharm itself start, and why did it start?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the context that Guru Nanak is in is, I mean, he was born at a time when Punjab was ruled by the Lodhis, the precursors, Sultanate precursors to the Mughals. And he also, the later part of his life, he saw the first Mughal emperor, which is kind of interesting in a way because there is this sort of parallelism between the first Mughal emperor Babur and the last, like, I guess, notable, infamous emperor Aurangzeb and Guru Gobind Singh.
Right.
But I think that the sort of Punjab was very rich at the time in a lot of ways. There were a lot of religious traditions, in the sense of there were a lot of heated, strongly contested religious traditions. Like we know, for example, that there were, those who followed Shariat very, very strictly, or those who followed caste norms very strictly. But there was also there were a lot of subsets within, like the Nath Jogis, very prominent, especially in Guru Nanak's writings. We also have a lot of Sufis. So it's this sort of motley of all these assorted religious groups in Punjab. And I think Guru Nanak's came in, and also, of course, I forgot to mention the Bhakti movement, which was definitely, it was across India really, but a lot of it happened to be concentrated in Punjab. Like, for example, like Kabir, he's from what is now Uttar Pradesh, but a lot of his writings happen to be popular in Punjab. So all of these things, I think, fostered a very intellectual culture. People were starting to look, there's a paradigm shift, right? Because within the sort of Indic idea, Dharm is sort of isolated within the Indian subcontinent. And then when Islam came, that sort of disrupted the whole worldview, in a sense. So this was sort of a time to see how these two paradigms could sort of make how they could coexist, in which way could they coexist, in which way could these two theological worldviews clash, along with these other, very mystic interpretations.
Sure.
And so one thing I always have discussed with my friends that Guru Nanak, I think, was definitely one who walked along the Sant ka marg, meaning like the path of the Sants. He took a very mystic view of spirituality. Mystic meaning he quite literally decries any sort of physical, ritual markers of religion. He basically de-emphasizes these things that we consider, these any sort of ritual, any sort of, even the idea of religious identity. It's sort of lampooned in the sense that, okay, what you identify as is less so important than what you actually do. There's a focus on Guru Nanak. He viewed meditation and spiritual actualization mostly through the method of singing, because that is how he practiced. But singing, reciting, kirtan, these were the things he thought were the most effective in getting sort of spiritual mukti, or that's the Punjabi word for moksha,
right?
Versus particular penance to a specific, religious ideology or, and so on. So one big example of that I would say is like one of the big debates Guru Nanak had was about the role of a householding life.
Mhm.
So there's a text, the Siddh Gosht, which basically addresses these dialogues Guru Nanak had with the Kanfata yogis, who are yogis who would renounce the world, they would go live in the forest and all that. And Guru Nanak he's agreeing with them in the sense that he's not saying that he's on a completely different spiritual theological paradigm, but he's saying, okay, the spiritual goals you want to achieve, you don't need to go out and renounce and do all these rituals of piercing your ears and doing all that.
Sure.
You can just do that, like living a householder life, balancing the two. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
I mean, it's interesting because that tension, right, between the yogi mentality and the householder mentality, in some sense, is as ancient as the Dharm itself, right? You have the Pravritti Marg and Nivritti Marg, right? That the path of, at least in the Hindu context, or even in some sense, the Vedantic and yoga context, the Pravritti Marg is the path of the householder, of being in the world and connected to the world and doing all those things. And Nivritti Marg is the path of breaking free and kind of the aesthetic path, right? So that's that tension, which I think it's inherent not only in the Vedic and throughout the Vedic period, all the way down to modern time. You can see that even probably with Nanak's conversation with the yogis.
Mm-hmm.
And just on that note, I mean, you're saying that Nanak was more mystical, but did he not take quite a few pilgrimages across northern India during that time period and go to various locations?
So he took 4 udasis.
Yeah.
Udasis meaning he travels.
Mm-hmm.
And so in his journeys, so he took 1 to the south, 1 to the east, 1 to the, I guess, north. I'm not sure how that's.
Kashmir,
and 1 to,
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and then 1 to the west, so all the way to actually Makkah.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say they're pilgrimages in the sense that I guess the word tirat is often used, or Hajj in the Islamic sense.
Yeah.
Because it's not said that, Guru Nanak actually, he critiqued the spiritual concept of a tirat, meaning like the idea of a pilgrimage for the sake of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
But he definitely visited a lot of different major areas across India. So Jagannath Puri, he went there. He visited, Makkah, so that's like sort of Islamic center.
Now, do we have strong historical sources to indicate that he probably went there, or is that a local tradition within Sikhism?
Yeah. So some people say like, oh, Guru Nanak went all the way to like Italy and he went to America. That stuff there's not really. That's kind of hearsay. But the first mention of these sort of udasis is, so there's two main sources. One is the Janam Sakhis. These are like literally the life stories. So they're a sort of corpus of literature that is dedicated literally to the life of Guru Nanak. Technically to all the gurus, but there's a lot of them specifically dedicated to Guru Nanak. And there's also the writing of Bhai Gurdas. So Bhai Gurdas he's a contemporary of the 5th Guru. So he writes about Guru Nanak's travels across all these places.
So in some sense, these texts were compiled 100, maybe anywhere from 50 to 100 years after Nanak, correct? In a similar kind of way that the Gospels were compiled about 100 years after Jesus.
Yeah, so the Janam Sakhis, I think, were compiled a bit after. The Bhai Gurdas Vara were not, because they were compiled, I think, by the time of the 5th Guru. So yeah, I guess you can say like 70, 80 years after.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in the tradition, he's traveled to these places. And now, was this, there's always this conversation, I think, that happens is, was Nanak at the time creating a new Dharm, or not Dharm, but Sampradaya in some sense, or maybe Dharm, it depends on how you view it. Or was he within the tradition of the Hindu tradition trying to reform it in what he saw was a reform?
Yeah, so this is a good question. It's one that people have been debating for a while. I think I personally do believe that Guru Nanak was setting the foundation of a new Dharm. Sikh Dharm, in the sense that it was at least a new. So some people say the thing is, I think there's a lot of, like, some people say, okay, Guru Nanak was abandoning the Dharmic paradigm, abandoning the Abrahamic paradigm, creating a new paradigm. I don't exactly agree with that. I do think the path that Guru Nanak was creating was Dharmic, just like Gautam Buddha. But I think it was a recontextualization of Dharm within what he saw as things that were essential to spiritual practice, like that mattered within spiritual practice. So one example is, and I guess you can say this crystallized in the fact that Guru Nanak, after going about all these places, he kept a pothi, which is like basically a small booklet, which was actually composed of all his writings and hymns. And this is what was eventually incorporated in the Guru Granth Sahib. So he also collected writings from other saints. These were incorporated in the Guru Granth Sahib. And he founded a community in the last few years of his life in Kartarpur. So this was a self-sufficient community. So this was after all his udasis. And basically, after he founded this community, he gave over the Guru Gadi to Lena, who became Guru Angad Dev. So yeah.
Okay, so what was the reconceptualization of Dharm that he found to be very foundational to Sikhism at the time? I mean, what was he kind of reforming? I guess the better way to say it, not reforming, or what was his viewpoint that was different from what was before to kind of force him to create or set the foundation for new Dharm?
Yeah. So I mean, I think for one, I think Guru Nanak was very interested in resolving this tension between the two theological paradigms at the time. Okay. So the way he set about doing it is very similar to how various Bhagavati. I would say you have to. There's
About the two paradigms, you mean Islam and Hinduism?
Yeah, Islam and Hinduism. Okay. In the sense that, like, so he took it's the same way the Bhaktis did. This is something that's very similar to the Bhakti movement, where, like, let's say Kabir, he says Aval Allah Nur Upaya, and he contextualizes Allah within the sort of same omnipresent I guess force that, like, Brahman is. Brahman is. So I think that's one sort of philosophy. The other thing he did was he really focused, I think, on distilling spirituality to the mystic experience. There's a lot of texts where he specifically calls out, he very socially, actually, he's very socially aggressive against certain aspects of the community of the time, which include caste, include his critiques extend to sort of the clergy, the idea of these established clergies. They include the practice of untouchability, and so all of these things, I think, they were little. Another point is the sort of resolving of how Guru Nanak advocated for this sort of to Guru Nanak. There's not. I mean, it's ironic because his son actually went on to found a sort of ascetic pathway. He went on to become a yogi, in a sense. But he viewed spirituality as it wasn't a duality. There's this, there's this one main goal, and you can get it through this one simple way of the mystic experience. And the other things are more or less distractions, or you can say just red herrings, I guess, to that point.
Sure.
And so I think all of these, so what I want to mention is all these, I think, crystallized in the sort of, I think if Guru Nanak just went about and he just did these things, it wouldn't really, he would just be another sant, right, in Northern India at the time. I think what the revolution thing Guru Nanak did was he sort of formalized all these and funneled them into, his establishment of Kartarpur, that Sangat there that was living by those establishments, and the Gurgadi, which set about, socially implementing these reforms in a more systematic way.
Right. So, I mean, I'm going to try to give a little bit of pushback here because I think it's interesting, especially in that time period. So you do have, quite a bit of different traditions kind of being founded, growing, and developing at that time, right? Not only do you have the Sikhi movement, you have the movement from the Ramanandis, you have the movement from, like Kabir's, the Kabir Panth, you have movements from, in South India, you have like, the Dasa movement, and then the Vaishnavite movement, and then the Shaivite movements, all these different communities, right? But within each of these different communities, they kind of are laying out their own tradition of sorts, and they're doing similar kind of work, right? Like they're fighting back against the practice of jati at that time and how it was being practiced, and untouchability, and they're all talking about the social messages, and many of them are also talking about things like breaking away from the pure ritualism, right? Like for example, if you even look at someone like Shankaracharya, his whole entire Bhaja Govindam starts with Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Mudamate, right? Like he talks about like how people just focus on grammar or ritual or this or that, and how that's not the way to have the experience of Brahman or Mukti or whatever. It's a mystical way. So what would, in that sense, would you say that it's separate from these kind of various traditions as much as they're separate from themselves, or is it something entirely different?
So I think that's one interesting. So yeah, so I think I understand what you're saying. So one thing is that I don't think there's alterity for alterity's sake. Meaning, like there definitely are parallels. There definitely, the Ramanandis, for example, they're really good. The Kabir Panthis, they're very good examples of groups that were parallel and that were seen as parallel, actually. And so, like, and Guru Nanak himself, he actually, so in one, he talks about eating meat, and the sort of hypocrisy. So he cooked, according to the Janam Sakhi, he was cooking a deer during a solar eclipse, and a Pandit comes and reprimands him for it. He says, this is inauspicious to cook the meat. Meat is, so on. It's not good. And Guru Nanak actually gives an argument from the Puranas saying, at one point, I think in the Yajnas, the gods, devtas themselves, they, cooked the rhinoceros and they ate its flesh. So he definitely is engaging. He's not like I'm, isolated and and that's sometimes I think the modern sense that he created like this thing that was totally disconnected. He was definitely engaging with these communities. It was definitely something parallel. And the other thing I would say is that I think at that time, Guru Nanak's time, Sikhs weren't like, it's not like, okay, you were a Sikh and you are no longer a Hindu, or you were, because his lifelong, so this is something that's very interesting, is his lifelong companion, Mardana, he was a Muslim. But he wasn't like, so people say, they're like, okay, was he Muslim or did he convert to Sikhism? And it's like, he's both, because actually his descendants, they're Rababis, they do Kirtan, but they identify as Muslim. And so a lot of his followers, they were, at that time there was no crystallized Sikh identity.
Sure.
So yeah, so I guess in that sense, during the time of Guru Nanak, his establishment in Kartarpur, it would be very similar to like what you see with Kabir Panthis, Daddu Panthis, where there's a group associated living together with similar practices, but they haven't like made a major declaration of their identity that's completely a break from their previous identities.
Which is, I think this is a very unique. Not the Sikhi.
Oh, wait, and let me add one more thing actually. Sure. So even today, if you know anyone from Sindh, this is why. Yeah. So Sindhi people, I remember Ranveer Singh, the Bollywood actor, people were very confused because he's like a Hindu, but he had a Sikh marriage. Yeah. And so it's what's called a Sahajtari or Nanak Panthi. So they were folks very prominent in Punjab at the time, who they identify as Hindu. So they do Hindu, marriage ceremony, rituals, all that, but they go to the Gurdwara. And so I know some Nanak Panthis, they've never been to a mandir. They just go to Gurdwara, but they're Hindu. So that's sort of, I guess, maybe can give an idea of what people, same with Kabir Panthis, that's what a Nanak Panthi would be.
Which I think is very interesting. I think this is the common issue throughout probably all of the Dharmic traditions, right? Whether you're Sikhi, Jain, Buddhist, Hindu, Shakta, Shaivite, a lot of these, whatever term you want to put for various groups, you see so much kind of overlapping, right? Like, for example, a lot of Jains, even though they're, they partially consider themselves to be entirely different, but at the same time, they consider themselves Hindu, right? I think these ideas of religion as being a definite category of particular sets of beliefs or particular rituals, and you only have to focus on that, is very it's kind of an anathema in the Indian or the Dharmic sense, right? Because there are people. I also know quite a few Hindus that go to Gurdwara a lot, even though they don't identify as Sikh. They go to Gurdwara a lot because they see the same unity of like thought, so they might participate in those things. And so, I mean, part of me always feels like difficult to talk about Indian or Dharmic traditions as separate religions in the Western sense. It just seems very, very incongruous to use that term for this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is definitely this weird. It is so hard to talk about these things because a lot of these categorizations were sort of crystallized, I guess, in the colonial period, and they kind of removed a lot of the diversity of thought that was sort of the blurred lines, so to speak.
Right.
But yeah, so I definitely agree. I think there's one aspect, I think, to Sikhism that sort of crystallized the religious identity, which is the Khalsa with Guru Gobind Singh.
Okay, so we'll get there because I think that's important too. So still focusing on Nanak then. He lived for about 80 years, right? That's is that correct, or was it longer?
Yeah, I think around that.
Yeah. So after him, so he created this new path that was, at that time they hadn't called it Sikhi yet, right? It was kind of just the Nanak. I mean, what would they call it at that time? What did they call it?
So well, technically they were Sikhs but they were Sikhs in the sense that, like, the Guru Shishya tradition,
right?
Guru Sikh tradition. So he was the Guru, and those who followed him were called in the literature, they're called Guru Sikh.
And did he have a Guru himself that he claimed?
No.
Okay, so he was kind of like what we call a swam Guru, a Guru that came up on his own and had an experience and issues.
Yeah. The experience he had was so at one point he was meditating, and they say he disappeared in the river Nadi, and he came back after 3-4 years, and he sort of had this revelation, which was said, "Na koi Hindu, na koi Musalman."
Okay.
And then after that he penned the Japji, the Mool Mantar and the Japji Sahib, which were like his sort of foundational writings, and that is how his spiritual journey more concretely, I guess, started.
So what was he before he became a guru? What would he? Yeah.
So he's still referred to as a guru throughout, even when he was born.
Oh, okay. No, but before that experience, I would say. Okay, so let's say before that experience of leaving, of disappearing into the river and then coming back, what was he a young boy when that happened? Was he already married? I mean, what was his life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so he was born into a Khatri family. That's a mercantile caste. His dad was a shopkeeper, and so he had a lot of interesting spiritual experiences, I think, growing up. Like, he went to a madrasa. He was enrolled in a to learn Sanskrit. The tradition says that he passed these very quickly. He learned these things there's a Gurdwara actually in Pakistan where his school originally was, and there's all these some of these miraculous events about his childhood that are spoken of. And there's also stuff like, for example, at one point, this is a very famous Sakhi. His father asked him, he said, go do some business. I give you this many rupees, go, I want you to take up the ways of our, way of life. Yeah. And he goes and spends that money. He sees a group of basically people in the forest, which was an assortment of people from the outcasts, people from the sort of yogis, many ascetics. And he decides instead to put that money towards starting a community, a small kitchen for this group of people. And the tradition is that I've actually visited the Gurdwara that marks that spot. Is that he was there for a few months, just running that kitchen, feeding these people, and then he came back to his father, and his father's like, what did you do with the money? And he's like, I did the true business of this.
And is this the foundation of Munger?
This is so this is like this is something where the Langar is actually attributed to the third guru.
Okay.
But this is sort of seen as, okay, this was a precursor to even that official establishment of Langar, because Langar was actually then it was iterated upon with the second guru, but the third guru is sort of who really established it and made it what it is today. But yeah, so there are all these sort of stories. Like there's one where he's counting in the shop and he hits 13 tera, and he just keeps saying tera 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 tera, and his people are like, why? And then he's like, tera tera, like everything is yours, referring to like
right,
the divine. So there's all these stories. But this river in the Nadi, this happened I think when he was like a young adult, and after this event is when he goes on his udasis, which take up most of his life. He gets married. He also gets married. I think he gets married after this event or maybe before. But yeah. And then he, after the udasis, comes back, establishes Kartarpur, meets the new guru, and so on.
So and how much of the Guru Granth Sahib is attributed to him?
So I don't have the exact numbers, but he is one of the bigger contributors. So the way it's him is that every Shabad in the Guru Granth Sahib, it starts with a Mahalla. So Mahalla means house.
Okay.
And Mahalla Pella is the first house. So means like the first guru. And so what's interesting is that he always, because he would sign his poetry as Nanak, all the other gurus actually would also sign their poetry as Nanak. So you will know when you find out the writer is you see from Mahalla Panjava means like the fifth one, the fifth guru. So, but he would sign his name as Nanak, because in the Sikh tradition, the view is the gurus are the same, the light is the same. There are 10 different bodies that was passed on.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so he dies or attains samadhi through natural means, right? And then who's the second guru with that one?
Guru Angad Dev.
And that's his son.
That is that is the what? Sorry.
That's Nanak's son, right?
No, that's not Guru Nanak's son. He came from a different clan. He also came from a mercantile clan. So he was a devotee of Guru Nanak, who eventually, after a few years, Guru Nanak, there's Sakhis also how the relationship was established, the sort of tests that the Guru would give, and so that's how it was passed on to Guru Angad Dev.
Now, did Nanak have children?
He did have children, yeah.
But were they somehow connected to the Guru tradition or not?
So his children, actually, what's interesting is that at the time, they kind of went against what Guru Nanak said, in the sense that one of them, Prithvi Chand, he sort of just did his own thing. He kind of got into a conflict with Guru Angad Dev. The other, Sri Chand, he actually founded his own order, called the Udasis, who are actually ascetics. They pretty much look exactly like yogis. So there was actually historically it's interesting because there was a tension at the time between like these Sikhs, who followed the path of the gurus, and these Udasis, and that eventually came to a reconciliation under the fifth guru, who sort of they reconciled. And since ever from the fifth guru to the 10th guru, the Udasis and Sikhs, mainstream Sikhs, what we can say, they've been very closely intertwined.
Okay.
And that relationship was there, for a while, until the colonial period, where the sort of the Udasis, they sort of faded away from the mainstream.
But there's still there's ripples of them, right?
There's still ripples of them. There's some Udasi Deras in Punjab. There's a lot of people who are now taking interest in them, because now there's more awareness of this history. People didn't even know what the Udasis were, and there was a lot of propaganda that because they're very heterodox. They're not like typical Sikhs.
Okay.
They would not follow the Khalsa religious. They were kind of the blurred lines, as you would say. And there's even within the Udasis, there's some of them who cut their hair and shave, and and they wear dreads and all that, so they look very similar to sort of these jogis.
Right.
And there's some of them who they wear, they keep their hair long, but they don't wear a turban. They're still not Khalsa. So there is even there, I guess, for the mindset of, okay, you're either a Sikh or a Hindu. They kind of just people didn't really get what they were, and so
Right.
They've kind of been sidelined for various reasons. But yeah, the ripples are there. I think actually there's way more awareness of them in the last, I'd say, 5 years.
Okay.
Way more awareness of them. Because there's a lot of good historical research, especially coming from the UK.
Yeah.
A lot of awareness, and people are trying to understand and sort of appreciate them in a historical sense. But yeah, at the time of Guru Nanak, they were kind of like running parallel, but they weren't like friendly. Like, I guess
Sure.
They weren't mainstream Sikhs.
So after Nanak, you have Guru Angad, and what's kind of his background and what did he bring to the tradition that Nanak started?
Yeah, so Guru Angad, he's the one who he took another step in standardizing langar. He started his own establishment. I forget the exact name, but so he also, he wasn't a traveler, so he started, having actual congregations in specific areas. One thing people don't know is he actually started the tradition of mal akhadas within the Sikhs.
What is that?
So that's like wrestling,
Okay.
basically wrestling akhadas. Mal is wrestler. So
Yeah.
he was a wrestler himself, and he started this, within Sikh congregations, starting the idea of, physical fitness and all that. Langar was starting to become more concrete there. His wife, Mata Kivi, she was known for serving devotees a lot, and he also wrote a lot of compositions. But he basically continued on the path that Guru Nanak started. And he also standardized Gurmukhi for writing. So,
Okay.
Guru Nanak wrote in this script Landa, which is a sort of precursor to Gurmukhi, but Guru Angad sort of standardized that more and made it what Gurmukhi is today.
So at this time, you have Nanak's writing, but you also have other people's writing, right? You have the contemporaries like the Kabir, you have Ramdas, a bunch of different people that were included into the Granth Sahib later. Were they included at this point, or did that happen much later?
So I think Guru Nanak got his writings on his travels. The other gurus, he had a pothi where he kept all his writings, and he also, I would assume, included Kabir's writings. Guru Angad contributed to that pothi. Then the next guru contributed to the pothi, and that was sort of all culminated under the fifth guru, who he's the one who did the formal process of bringing in a lot of the Bhagats, some of the Bhatts, the poets, and the guru's writings, categorizing them and producing the Adi Granth, the first edition of the Adi Granth, which is now the Guru, what would become the Guru Granth Sahib.
Okay.
Then,
so yeah, go ahead. No, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that.
Okay, so after Guru Angad, which is I just want to throw out a little interesting tidbit, right? Angad is also the name of, in the Ramayana, the son of Vali, who was known to be a great wrestler in the Ramayana and warrior. So it's interesting how Angad in Sikhi tradition started the first, the wrestling arenas.
That's interesting. Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah. So after Angad, who's the third guru then?
The third guru is Guru Amar Das. So he's known for he was very actually old. So he's always portrayed with a white beard, because when he became guru, he's very old. He was older than Guru Angad.
Okay.
And so he started, so he formalized the concept of langar. He's the one who the Emperor Akbar met. And Akbar, when he met him, he was told, you have to sit down and eat langar with everyone else before you meet the guru. And after that, the guru was pleased with the guru, and he gave him some land grants across Punjab.
Okay.
And so that's one thing, is instituting langar in a more systematic way. He spoke out against the practice of sati, and also against the practice of parda or veiling. So these were sort of some reforms that were attributed to him. And he also started the Mangy System, which was basically small Sikh organizations the decentralization, if you will, of the Sikh Sangat. So sending, let's say you appoint a Manji in, like, South India, one in Kabul, and they would be, that person they would basically administer the local Sikh Sangat there. They would all report back to the Guru, but he started this system more, and he also wrote and contributed to the Guru Granth Sahib.
And at this time, even though the so far the three gurus we talked about have been based out of Punjab, where was the reach of the Sikhi tradition in that?
At that time, it was pretty big. So I mean, the three gurus were based in Punjab, but there were sangats across India and ranging up to Kabul. So there was a big reach. And the gurus kept, and the Mangy system is a lot of what allowed them to sort of expand the reach a bit more. So this is something interesting. Is I was just reading that apparently Bihar, before recent times, had a very strong non-Ekpanthi population.
Interesting.
So
I mean, I'm assuming still at this time period, which is probably the early 1700s, maybe, right?
No, this time period, the
1500s. I'm sorry, yeah, because Nanak was 14 something, right?
1469, yeah.
1469. Yeah, so this would probably be like mid to late 1500s.
Yeah.
So it was still relatively a small community, right? I would assume. Population.
Yeah, I think Guru Amar Das is when it started getting, it's a big, I guess, moment, because Akbar is said to have met Guru Amar Das. So that's the time where they start expanding more. And yeah, but I think Guru Ram Das and Guru Arjan is where the Sikh community starts to become more well known.
So do we know what Akbar thought about this tradition at that time?
So we don't have any Mughal renditions. All we have is that he came, according to the tradition. He had langar. He was pleased with it, and I think at the time most emperors, especially Akbar, relatively, they had religious grants to various. So it's assumed that Guru Amar Das got one of those religious grants.
Now Akbar started his own religion too at that time, right? I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, but was the Sikhi tradition involved in that? Because he tried to include different communities.
No, it was not. It was not included at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, so we had the third Guru, Guru Amar Das. Who was the one that followed him?
Guru Ram Das.
Okay, and can you tell us about Ram Das?
He was the one who started a tank in what is now Amritsar. So that was land that he had bought. And so he started the process of what would become the Harmandir Sahib, or Darbar Sahib, the Golden Temple.
Yeah.
So he built that tank. He started the makings of a city in that allotted land. And that was one of his big contributions. He did write a lot of hymns. He sang a lot. But he's most, I guess, known for starting the solid institution building, building a city,
right.
A Sikh city, a Sikh center. And so at this time, I don't think there were any noteworthy interaction with the Mughals, but the Mughal interaction started with his son, who became the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev.
Okay. Now Arjan's like after Nanak, really like the really big one that is talked about by a lot of historians and generally the population. So let's talk a little about Guru Arjan. Can you give us his background, and was he related to any of the previous gurus, or was he kind of developed on his own? How did he come into the picture?
Yeah, so he was the son of Guru Ram Das, the fourth Guru, and from this point onwards, the guruship. So Guru Ram Das, his clan name was Sodhi. From this point onwards, the guruship would stay within the Sodhi family.
Okay.
So Guru Arjan, he was the last, I guess, major contributor so he compiled the Adi Granth, which is all the hymns. He edited, Bhai Gurdas was his scribe. So he basically, there's a lot of evidence too to show how, he took all these various writers of the time, he assorted them, spent a lot of time making this compilation and formalizing it with the Adi Granth scripture. He was a very prolific musician. So he continued that tradition of composing and his own composing and singing. He built the Harmandir Sahib. So the tank was built out by the beginnings of the city was built out by Guru Ram Das, but Guru Arjan actually created the sort of the city, the what is now the Harmandir Sahib, that temple, and he came on the radar. He is most well known, I think, because he came on the radar of Jahangir.
Yeah.
So at that time, because they were doing Sikhs were doing prachar. They were starting to get pretty well known. They were doing prachar on to as I mentioned before, the Sikh identity hadn't really crystallized as a separate thing.
Sure.
So Jahangir in his own autobiography talks about there's a Arjun near Goindwal. He many Hindus follow him, but even some Muslims have followed him, and this is a great outrage, and we need to bring him into the purview of Islam. And there's also a writing by a prominent Naqshbandi, which is basically a more orthodox Sufi group at the time. So Sheikh Ahmed Sarhindi. So he wrote letters to some say this was probably the sparking moment. He wrote letters to Jahangir saying, the infidel Arjun, he's committing a great atrocity by, teaching the Muslims in the area. He's misleading them. He must be dealt with. And so he was executed by the Mughal emperor. He was told to convert it. He was pretty brutally tortured. He said, we'll let you out if you convert to Islam. The Guru refused, and he passed away in this way.
So let me ask, Jahangir, was he a fanatical Mughal leader according to the Sikh tradition, or a fanatical, fundamentalist Muslim, or was he bowing to pressures from the mullahs and the muftis at the time?
So Jahangir, he has an interesting, I think, relation. So this actually, the interesting thing is, there's so many reasons for the execution of Guru Arjan, because at one point also there's Jahangir's rebel Prince Khusro, who is so he rebelled against him, and he comes to the abode of Guru Arjan. Guru Arjan applies a tilak on him, like in a respectful way. So this is also seen as a political element. There was also one of the Guru's family friends, Chandu Shah. So he was, he got very upset with the Guru at one point. He was someone in the court of Jahangir. And so in one of the Sikh texts, Suraj Prakash, a lot of the blame is placed on him for inciting the emperor, pushing the emperor towards this way. So it's kind of interesting because I think in the Sikh texts, there's this attitude, which it is very, I guess it's not very reverent towards the Mughals.
Yeah.
But it's also not. It also acknowledges there was a multiplicity of factors, and maybe that's because the next Guru Hargobind, who actually started militarizing, he actually had a temporary alliance with Jahangir at one point, political alliance. But they also got into battles with the Mughal.
Sure.
So
So in this period of time, right? I mean, this is right around the time of the Maratha Empire, also, correct?
No, the Marathas came about, I think, later.
Well, this is probably the early 1600s, right?
Yeah.
So the Marathas started, their ascendancy started around this time. I thought, is it Shivaji something around 1670 or something like that?
Yeah. So Shivaji came on the stage around a bit before the time of Guru Gobind Singh.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe the Peshwas were the ones at this time that were. Well, I mean, Bajiram was around at this time. I'm pretty sure, right?
Bajirao came after Shivaji.
Okay. See, my history of medieval India is not very good when it comes to the Mughal period. I get my dates mixed up here, but so we have Jahangir, and then we have Guru Arjan's death. Now, as you indicated, the next guru was in the line of Arjan, which is Guru Hargobind, right? So, how old was Hargobind when his father was killed?
So he was, I think, 9, and he also was actually jailed. So they put him in a Gwalior jail.
Okay.
The emperor for insurrection. So he
So-
was jailed at a very young age.
Did he immediately become guru, or was there something that took time for him at some point to become guru? After
So
that?
before Guru Arjan was, before he went to his execution, he was anointed Guru Hargobind as the next guru.
Okay. And so what can you kind of talk about Hargobind then, and kind of his life and what his impact was on the tradition?
Yeah, so Guru Hargobind had a very, he was sort of he's noted as being sort of the time of the paradigm shift, because up to this point, the gurus are very, there's makings of the Malakhara and Guru, institution building, but there's nothing explicitly martial, I guess. Guru Hargobind is the warrior guru. So he learns Shastra Vidya, he learns the art of war, puts a lot of effort into that, and he was known as being a great swordsman. They said he kept two swords, one of Midi, one of Pidi. Midi being the sort of the Amir, like political power, and Pidi being representative of the sort of a spiritual power.
Okay.
So he builds the Akal Takht, which is the throne of Akal, and he actually built it. So the tradition goes, he built it there was a maximum height that anyone could build any throne in Mughal India, because you couldn't build it above what the Mughals
Sure.
deemed the throne is. So he built it above that. And so this is like the eternal throne. And he brings in a political element, because there is a political element in Guru Nanak's teachings too, because he does criticize a lot of the existing kings and the existing political structure, but he's more active. He's getting Sangat for the first time. He's asking, bring me guns, bring me horses, bring me weapons, start army battles. He maintains a standing army. He gets in some battles with the Mughals emperor. And yeah, so and this is actually something interesting. This was a big paradigm shift for Sikhs too. Sikhs were they were very confused. They were like, the other gurus, they used to sit and just kirtan. This one, he goes out hunting. He hangs with, he hangs with these people who are, warriors and robbers and former robbers and all that stuff. And so Bhai Gurudas, who the scribe of the Adi Granth, who's a very respected,
Who's connected to his father? Yeah.
Yeah. So he writes, the rose is covered by thorns. Right? He's like, these people have not understood what Guru Hargobind stands for.
So my question would be, okay, Hargobind starts this militaristic move. Now, was it due in part to the way his father was killed, or was there some sort of issues that the Sikh community was dealing with that maybe he or other reason why he would take up arms?
So people view it as a sort of next evolution, but I think that the execution of his father was a sort of a sparking moment that kind of lit the collective conscience. Yeah, that's why the major engagements he had there was one engagement he had with like Chandu's son, who was like Chandu's the guy who helped the Mughals execute his father, but yeah, it was in response to that polity. So
because it's interesting, because like you indicated, like all the 5 previous gurus seem to be much more on the mystical and spiritual path of really focusing on on the kirtan and meditation and all that stuff. And then you have this kind of a shift, at least for Hargobind. So what did he bring outside of the militaristic aspect and kind of the warriorness to the community? Was there elements into the tradition that he brought too?
So those were the elements in the tradition.
Okay.
Because he didn't write compositions that were in the Guru Granth Sahib. He did actually do kirtan, and he performed it. The tradition says he played instruments, and so he was very aware of Gurmat Sangeet. He was very, he did kirtan and all that. But the main element he brought was the element of sort of this martial character and this more explicitly political institutionalization, which was
okay.
Prior, yeah.
And then what happened to him?
So he passed on through natural means.
Okay.
And so the guruship then went to Guru Har Rai. So Guru Har Rai is he he maintained the standing army. He was actually he's known for being very peaceful, but it's kind of interesting because he maintained the standing army. He maintained the regal dress that Guru Hargobind started, which was he started wearing a plume, which was to signify more explicit that he was a sort of the actual term Sikhs use for the Guru sometimes is Sache Padshah, which means the true emperor, because Badshah is off the Mughal Badshahs, but the Sikhs, the Sache Padshah is the Guru. But so Guru Har Rai kept these traditions. He actually opened up a zoo. He opened up a medicine dispensary. He was known for being very humanitarian, he had a keen interest in botany. But yeah, so that's what he was, I guess, known for. He was followed by his son, Guru Har Krishan. So Guru Har Krishan was the 8th Guru. He is known as a child Guru because he was only a child when he was anointed, just like Guru Hargobind was. In a sense. He was a bit younger, but he actually, his main abode was what is now Bangla Sahib in Delhi. So he's known for, he was doing a lot, there was a smallpox plague going around at the time. And so he was known for doing caretaking around Bangla Sahib and all that. He eventually contracted smallpox and he passed away.
And how old was he when he passed?
He was 8.
8, okay. So so this is interesting. So at this point, it's hereditary, kind of the guruship. So the community saw, I guess, each of these individuals as being gurus in each of themselves and having that authority even from that young age.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it's so Guru Har Krishan is known as a child guru, but if you think about it, actually, even Guru Gobind Singh and Guru Hargobind, they were actually child gurus too. It's just they were able to go advance onto. And there was also a lot of problems because when it was this hereditary system, like what happened, you even see this with Guru Hargobind. One of his cousins tried assassinating him when he was a baby because, like, there was a lot of different Sodhi, there was a lot of splits, a lot of, people were upset they didn't get the guruships, they would start their own, and they would try, fighting. So there was a lot of, within the Sikh tradition, a lot of chaos. So the need for a specific, it was a relative of the Guru, but it was also chosen amongst those.
Okay. So after Guru Har Krishna, right?
Yeah, Guru Har Krishna,
yeah. Who was the one that followed him?
Guru Tegh Bahadur. So Guru Har Krishna, it's his uncle, who is Guru Hargobind's son. So he's the 9th Guru, but he's the 6th Guru's son.
Okay.
So he is very interesting because Guru Tegh Bahadur was he was a great warrior in his youth, but he had kind of, and he continued to be a great warrior, but he was very much interested in more the kirtan and that mystic tradition. And so he is the last gurus whose writings are featured in the Guru Granth Sahib.
Okay.
And so he was also, and his was also a watershed moment. He's also well known because under him, the saga of the Kashmiri Pandits coming, and this is when Aurangzeb was on the scene.
Right.
So he's the governor of Kashmir at the time, implementing Aurangzeb sort of like convert everyone to Islam policy. He basically put that on the Kashmiri Pandits. So a congregation of them visited the 9th Guru, and the 9th Guru said, okay, you know what, I will go as designated as representative. And he said, he told them, he said, if you can kill me, if you can convert me to Islam, then these followers of, mine, these Kashmiri Pandits, they will also convert. And the Guru he came with 4 companions. They were tortured really badly. So one was like sawed in half from the face, from like the middle of the face. One was boiled in hot water. One was put in cotton and that was set on fire. And the Guru himself was beheaded. So
under Aurangzeb's orders, right?
Under Aurangzeb's orders. It was in Lahore. So there's a Gurdwara, it was in Delhi. It was in Delhi. So there's a Gurdwara in, the 5th Guru was executed in Lahore. So there's a Gurdwara there. He was executed in a Gurdwara, which is now in Chandni Chowk, called Sees Ganj, which means where the Guru gave his head.
So do we? I mean, obviously the Was Aurangzeb present for that, or was it done outside of his purview in the sense of like his? Did you not watch it?
According to Sikh tradition, he was present. Sikh tradition here is very, very explicitly against Aurangzeb on this point. It's unlike where Jahangir, where there's sort of there's like this multiplicity of factors. Here, it's pretty much, explicitly stated that it was Aurangzeb directly ordering. And there's also like some tales of like Aurangzeb being the one who's saying you must convert to Islam and doing this and all of that.
So why would there be that difference, right? Because Jahangir did the same thing to Arjun, right? So Guru Arjan. So why would there be that difference with Guru Tegh Bahadur's way he was killed versus Arjan's? Was it the brutality of it, or was it why is there more anger towards Aurangzeb versus Jahangir?
So I think with Jahangir, Jahangir himself was kind of like he was he was an alcoholic. He wasn't like really. So even the historians note that like he was at one point he was very riled up by the Naqshbandis, and the next he even imprisoned those Naqshbandis. So his own life wasn't really marked by this. It wasn't a constant. Whereas with Aurangzeb, his whole motto was we must preserve the sanctity of Orthodox Islam. We must bring it back. And there were explicit I guess. With Jahangir, there's the idea that he was incited by this guy, and there was also this political element that pushed, and there's also his insider Chandu. With Aurangzeb, it's he was very clearly somebody who had these policies widespread, explicitly for the purpose of enacting these sort of
So on a related note, we're having nowadays, especially recently, like someone like Audrey Trusky wrote a book about Aurangzeb and how he wasn't as fanatical as the Sikhs made out, and maybe it wasn't even him that ordered that, and so on and so forth. What has been the response within the Sikhi scholars, if or the community in response to this?
That's actually good that you mentioned, because I actually gave a very, very detailed response to Audrey about this on Twitter, which she responded to. But I debated her for some time on this, because I've pointed out that her treatment of Aurangzeb is just astonishingly bad. It's so bad, and like this question of how do you time this ninth guru's martyrdom? Her response was basically that, well, this is a religious event. There's no contemporary sources there. And Aurangzeb, like her own projection, Aurangzeb was a political guy, not a religious guy, so he wouldn't even have offered the thing of converting to Islam. And like there's one Sikh scholar, Amandeep Madara, who has responded. He said, I read Audrey's book, and I was very surprised that she said there's no contemporary sources when the 10th Guru himself writes that his father was killed for this reason.
And why would he make it up?
And her response to that was, well, it was written because he was a child at the time. So her response was, well, it was written maybe 15, 20 years after the fact. And I pointed this out, I was like, it was his father, right? That's a contemporary source. And she gave no response to that. And she basically tried mentioning, I think I had the thread in a moment. I'll probably send it to you.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because I gave a very detailed response. I actually said I was going to write. I started writing a full-blown article on Brown pundits for it, but I wanted to make it very dense, so I just got,
Sure.
But yeah, so her response was basically that, a community can have its memory whatever the way you want, but what the historical facts are says nothing. I'm like, no, look, we don't even, like, this isn't a thing about my belief as a Sikh. Like, what you're saying is grievously offensive to that belief, but let's put that aside. It's the fact that you are only looking at the Mughal source, and the one Mughal source because there's one Mughal source that says the Tegh Bahadur was, he was killed for inciting rebellion across Punjab and this, that. But that Mughal source is written 200 years after. Anyway.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So how does the contemporary issue then pop up?
So that's what even Madra pointed out. He said, This isn't just, ideological clash. It's just bad historiography, because you're literally ignoring, you're thinking, okay, the only Sikh reference to this event is it's only a Sikh reference, and it's only because there's no contemporary Mughal. Her argument was that, oh, well, if this was a big event, then the Mughals chroniclers at the time would have written about it in that sense. And it's just a very, like, there's so many events in Sikh history that aren't explicitly written like that, or just like, there's obviously two sides to a very contentious issue.
Well, I mean, could the issue have been, I mean, and with all due respect, could the issue have been like Aurangzeb didn't see this even as being worthy of being mentioned in his like biography because it was something he did on a regular basis? And who are these Sikhis, right? Why do I care about even putting them in? They're not like some big person in that I've killed otherwise, right?
No, exactly. Like, I think that's totally, like, for him, it was just, oh, this saint, he's coming in the way of this expansionist project. Just let's, be done with it. So
right.
I think it's just her historical analysis, I think, is faulty on a lot of issues. On this one, I think it breaks down in particular because, I mean, a lot of her views is that when someone responds to her history, even like a very civilized way, she's like, oh, this is because of the rise of the Hindu right wing.
Sure.
This is not, I'm just being targeted because of my activism. And with Sikhs, it's like, okay, you can't say that, right? So she's put in this interesting spot, and the way she's responded is still somehow maintaining that facade of, being a scholar while not really saying stuff that would hold up in any scholarly sense.
Sure. This is the only reason I think it's, there's multiple reasons I think it's interesting, but for the purpose of this conversation, it's really interesting because this is like a central, this was one of the last gurus of the Sikhi community, and there's a memory that's, and it's in relative history, it's pretty recent, right? So like the point you made is Gobind Singh, Tegh Bahadur's son, he would know how his father died, right? Unless everyone in the community is lying to him and saying this is how he died, but he didn't die that way, which is even more flabbergasting. But the interesting part to me is this is the first situation or first time I have read of any scholar in the Indian context writing about how Aurangzeb wasn't as fanatical and didn't kill Tegh Bahadur, right? It's a very opportune period of time in history that someone is writing that, where every single, from my understanding, every single, even native historian, and even people like A.L. Basham or Stanley Wolpert, all these guys will agree that this happened, but suddenly Audrey Chusky is saying it's not.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's the way it's because, again, my opinion is that she's interested in the narrative of, redeeming this one guy who's a very clear thorn to her view that, this history of persecution is just a modern made-up history.
Right.
And this one incident, which is so blaringly, blatantly a blight on her narrative, she just kind of hand waves it away. And she hasn't responded to my queries either, which is something this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the article in a more formulated sense.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll definitely link you that thread.
Yeah, I would love to read that article.
Yeah.
So continuing with this, so after Tegh Bahadur was killed by Aurangzeb, and then at this point, I think Gobind, like you indicated, Guru Gobind was pretty young, right? He was. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, he was pretty young. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened from here? Because this must have been a monumental moment also in the history of the Sikhi people even at that time.
Yeah, so it was indeed a monumental moment. So he witnessed the sort of so it was because when the guru was killed, the tradition says that his head was just left out there.
Right.
And so, like, everyone was afraid to go and grab the head and body in daylight. So like one Sikh by Jetta quickly in the middle of the night, he went and grabbed it. He did a proper cremation to it. Then another Sikh was able to do cremation to the body. And before Pai Jetta, he brought the head of Guru Tegh Bahadur to Guru Gobind Singh. So there's a lot of paintings describing that scene. And then he cremated the head, and then someone else cremated the body. And this did have, I think, a very fundamental, impact on Guru Gobind Singh, because he more rigorously, Guru Hargobind started the military tradition, and that was sort of present among just all the gurus. Guru Gobind Singh really elevated it to the next step. And so he wrote a lot of poetry, which is not in the Guru Granth Sahib. It's in a separate text called the Dasam Granth. It's with Dasam Granth is structured a bit differently. But he also created, as what many of us know, the Khalsa, which was more, this was disbanding the Mangy system before the decentralized system. It said from now on, the entire body of Sikhs collectively is the Khalsa. It more formally gave a religious identity. It gave a more, institutional approach. And there's a more formal initiation through Khande Di Pahal, which is the sugar water stirred by the sword. This is where the 5 Ks come in, the physical symbols for all Sikhs, the surnames Singh and Kaur for initiated Sikh men and women, and also the injunction that all the Khalsa now, it's not just, a standing army of you all have a responsibility, not just to be spiritual, but to live the sort of have that dualistic approach that the Sikhs Guru had, which was be spiritual but also be armed and be prepared for war.
So let's talk about let's go through his story and then we'll talk about the Khalsa itself. So he creates the Khalsa in response to what at that time, and why did it happen? What was the need?
So one thing is, I personally believe that the Khalsa was not created as a response to Guru Tegh Bahadur specifically. I think it was a culmination of sort of all of the institutional building, all of the resources that had gone into, that the previous gurus had established. It was a more concrete way of affirming this community's identity in a more permanent fashion. So the heavily martial aspect, I think that was definitely, it was inspired by the 6th Guru, but I think the martyrdom of the 9th Guru definitely, it elevated him to bring it to the next level, so to speak. So like amongst his composition, he has the Shastranam Malla, which is literally like a litany of just, it describes like praising various weapons. A lot of his poetry is about, Chandi, the warrior goddess, and describing her exploits on the battlefield. He writes about this imagined warrior. He has his own writing.
This is all Gobind, right?
Gobind, yeah. He has this imagined writing about Khadag Singh, who's he fights in like what would be ancient Vedic or Puranic times, which is this warrior, and he just describes his exploits in the battlefield. He was very skilled in bow and arrow, so Guru Hargobind was very good with the sword. Even Guru Tegh Bahadur is good with the sword. Guru Gobind Singh is good with sword, but his specialty is bow and arrow. He also, continues the tradition of arm yourselves. Now it's not just contribute to the standing army, you are the standing army, sort of. So yeah, I would say, yeah. And then also he dismantled that decentralized approach, because he said, because in that approach, you have a Masand who's local caretaker of all the local Sikh population. That approach is now gone. Everyone comes directly under the Guru. Everyone is a Khalsa Sikh.
Oh, interesting. So when this happened, the old system, kind of the Mangy system we talked about, kind of disappeared, and then the Khalsa system took over at that point, right?
It was dismantled, yeah. It was entirely dismantled, yeah.
Now the original Khalsa was how many people? Like, because there's a story around it, right, where he had people, like, was it 10 people or 5 people?
So the story, so it happened on Vaisakhi, which was a day or 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So he brought a congregation of all the Sikhs, which they would always congregate on Vaisakhi, all the Sikhs. And so he basically pulled out his sword and he said, okay, who is ready to give their head? And so, nobody said anything. He said, I need a head. And so eventually one volunteer came, another volunteer came. And so the tradition is, interestingly, that it says he took them behind this big tent he had, and he like chopped off a goat's head, and blood rushed out to like enact sort of drama that that person had died. And then after that, after the 5 were done, he declared, this is what, we demand. I demand of my Sikh. You need to be prepared to give your head. and now he wanted to, like, he gave them the first Amrit Sanchar, which is basically the first initiation as Khalsa Sikhs. So they all partook in that sugar water stirred with the double-edged sword,
Mhm.
and then they actually initiated the Guru himself into the Khalsa. So those five, and that's how the tradition is. 5 baptized Sikhs or initiated Sikhs initiate you into the Khalsa. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and from that point onward, you maintain that sort of the symbols of faith, the Khalsa identity, and so on.
So I mean, the thing I think a lot of people don't know is the 5 are actually from all over India. Right? There wasn't just Punjab.
Yeah. They were from different castes, and they were from, one was from Odisha, one was from Punjab, one was from Karnataka, Gujarat, Orissa, Punjab, and then I'm forgetting where the 5th was from. But yeah, they're all from all over India. That shows sort of how the Sikh Sanghas at the time were less concentrated in Punjab.
Right.
Now.
Right. And so after the creation of the cult, so what happened with Gobind, and kind of what was his life like? I mean, what was the purpose outside of the cult? So kind of for his he was a military guy. What was his kind of goal?
Well, his military, I mean, he didn't launch offensive battles.
Mm-hmm.
So his goal was then just, spreading the Khalsa. He had a fort in Anandpur in a small residential area, kind of like Kartarpur, but just at a larger scale now, because you have a political body, you have more solid institutions, and that caught the ire of some of the local Pahari Rajas, who then they launched an offensive on him with the help of Aurangzeb in his army, and so there were some battles fought, and after that, the Guru, he managed to escape from that battle to Punjab, and that in Punjab, there were a lot of Mughal principalities in eastern Punjab, so they launched an offensive on the Guru from there, and so two of his oldest sons, aged 15 to 17, they actually asked for his permission to go out and fight in this battle, which was literally, there were like 40 of them in this small Haveli, surrounded by like a force of around 1,000 or so, probably like 2,000. And so they went out, and what he would do is 5, 6 would go at a time. They would, fight to the death. Another 5 would go out, and his two sons, eldest sons who were with him, they asked to go out and fight, and they died as well. And at that point, the Guru's family was separated. So his 2 youngest sons, aged 7 to 9, they were with the Guru's mother, wife of Guru Tegh Bahadur. So they managed to reach one of those Mughal principalities in Sirhind, which is the easternmost of Punjab. And so he was very delighted to basically have them in his presence. And he was like, you know what, you guys should convert to Islam. This is going to be a big bruise to the ego of Guru Gobind Singh. And they refused to. And so for this, they were bricked alive, and their throats were slit, and at the age of 7 or 9. And after this, their grandmother, Mata Gujri, she died of shock. So basically, after all this is done, this came as a huge shock to the community.
Sure.
After all this is done, you have Guru Gobind Singh at the age of 35. He's lost his father as a child. He's lost his 4 sons. 2 of them just battle in front of his eyes. His children, his like little kids, they're also gone, and he's lost his mother.
Right.
So he spends his time writing poetry of various persuasions. He writes a letter to the emperor called the Zafarnama, which is the letter of victory, and it's written in Farsi, and it incorporates a lot of these themes from Persian literature to basically write this scathing remark on the emperor, saying, you think you're such a great Muslim, you do all this, you say all this great stuff, but you even failed to even, the one thing you thought you did was, oh, I'm such a great Muslim. But when you said, because at one point in the fort, when he was holed up in the fort, Aurangzeb, his commanders swore on the Quran that they would let the Guru go free, and they didn't. So he said, you even broke that faith. It's like, what is there to expect from someone like you? And so very emotionally charged. And in the last years of his life, the Guru went down south to Nanded, which is in Maharashtra. He started his Sangat there, and he managed to find an individual named Madho Das, who became a Sikh, Banda Bahadur. And Banda Bahadur led the Khalsa army back up north into Punjab to basically take to avenge the Sahibzades, the smallest children, and to basically, establish some sort of Sikh polity within those areas.
Okay. Okay. And then and Gobind at this period, he died in his 50s, right? Or
yeah, he died. He did. So he was so his story is that he was around, he was 50, I think 50 or maybe late 40s, because so that Wazir Khan, the guy who killed his two youngest sons, he actually sent two assassins to go, and they acted as his bodyguards.
yeah.
But then they basically, like, once in the camp, they like quickly stabbed him, and the Guru, then he managed to like kill both of them, but he was wounded. There was a doctor who patched up his wounds a bit, but the story goes is that eventually he succumbed to those wounds, and so he passed away.
Right.
But not before giving the Guru. So he gave the eternal status of the 11th Guru to the Khalsa Panth. He said, "You are the like physical manifestation of it," and the Guru Granth Sahib. So Guru Granth and Guru Panth, sometimes people say. So
okay. So now, I mean, we spent a lot of time with just the history. Now let's talk a little bit about the philosophy and kind of like the ideas behind Sikhism. Because I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is which I don't know about is, for example, like you indicated, Guru Gobind would write about Chandi and fighting in these battles. What was the gurus or this, I guess now the modern Sikhs view on like Puranic history or these battles between, like these stories like Mahabharata, Ramayana? What was their understanding of it? Because was it that they believed that these things were part of their story or they're metaphorical? How do they view it?
It's a good question. So I think at the time, the Guru writes, he cites a lot. Like, so when talking about his own battles, he says, like, one warrior, he fought with the ferocity of Dronacharya.
Yeah.
He even says, like, I think there's a lot of references so he kept a Kavi Darbar of 52 poets, and they translate a lot of Sanskrit literature into Braj. Mm-hmm. They minted sort of this new, so the Khalsa was very much founded with the belief that it was manifesting in this new age of Dharm. This new age, the Khalsa very much at that time believed that it was the sort of living legacy, the sort of manifestation of that power of Chandi, of that power of these, these ancient warriors, and all that. So I definitely think that was a key aspect of how the Khalsa envisioned themselves in terms of metaphorically, in terms of the battle that they were waging. In terms of what Sikhs literally believed about it, I mean, I guess Sikhs do generally accept the Jug system. So, like, Sikhs believe that we're in Kal Jug currently. So, but I guess for Sikhs, Kal Jug is the greatest Jug because it produced the Sikh Gurus. And so Sikhs are the Kal Jug, and Sikhs are the manifest. This is the traditional viewpoint, anyways. Obviously, some people will differ, but Sikhs view themselves as the sort of harbingers of justice in Kal Jug, the Khalsa.
Okay, so but I mean, how do they view like the traditional devatas and things of that nature in their system, right? Because you do have references to like Rama, Shiva, Krishna, Govind, the Chandi, and you have these deities, with their names brought up, and even when you're talking poetry, they're obviously describing how they're fighting, or because I know some Sikhs that also worship Chandi, right? So how do these quote unquote traditional Hindu deities play into the Sikhi religion?
So the worship is always conferred to the Nirgun, the formless, Akal, or even Hari, which is a name used for Christian.
Yeah.
It usually in the Guru Granth Sahib, when it's referring to Hari, it's referring to the formless vision.
Sure.
Of that. But these they definitely play a role in the sense that they're not worshipped per se, but they are respected in traditional Sikh tradition. So sometimes the position it kind of varies, but the gurus will, they will write about the stories of the Devta. There's even a poet of the Guru who says the Khalsa Panth is like it's Hanuman, like it is powerful, it is imbued with strength. And these, especially in the Sikh literary tradition, these Devta were especially revered because they're referenced, and there's so many analogs of them, and they're respected very, very much so. So yeah, but they're not, I guess, worshipped in the sense that we don't like murtis of the Dev. Are not like worshipped or any of that in that sense.
Sure.
But Chandi is especially interesting because Chandi, so the way Sikhs revere the spirit of Chandi is through the spirit of the sword.
Yeah.
And so the view is that that this is how Chandi is manifested to the Khalsa. The Khalsa is infused with the warrior spirit of the goddess, and so she's a very respected figure in the traditional Sikh ethos.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why if you go to Gurdwara, it's surrounded by weapons. Sikhs, they did worship weapons in a sense because it was considered, a sacred thing that Chandi came in the form of the sword.
Sure.
That is the form that the Khalsa recognizes as. Yeah.
So now, I mean, a lot of people do say that Sikhism takes some elements from Islam and some from Hinduism. What do you think are the elements it takes from Islam?
So I think one element it does take from Islam is the idea of religious identity, in the sense that the Khalsa, it's posited specifically as a Tisra Panth, which means the Guru says, it is different from the Hindu Panth, it is separate from the Islamic Panth, it is a third religious path. So I guess we were talking earlier about how Dharmic religions, there's a lot of blurred lines, and that's especially true with the first 9 Gurus. But with the 10th Guru, it is kind of taking this worldview that is, different. There is a sense of difference, not in the total Abrahamic sense of, the difference I think is that for Sikhs, this difference is just a difference in, let's say, your life rituals and in how it doesn't mean like if you become a Khalsa Sikh, that is the only right, because there's still non-Khalsa Sikhs, non-Ikpanthis who participate in the Gurdwara who would have dialogue with Sikhs. But I think the idea of having an exclusive religious identity, that is something, I guess, that is similar, analogous, I would say. Although that religious identity, one has to notice, is also separate from the 2 panths, which includes Hinduism and Islam.
Sure.
And the other aspect I would say is some of the there's a lot of Islamic hate. I would use that term, which refers to cultural aspects. So like Nihang. Nihang is a Persian, is a Farsi word.
Sure.
There's Bungas. Bungas is a Farsi word.
Yeah, these are words, but what concepts or ideas does it take into?
Yeah, so these ideas these are like, that's why it's more Islamic hate, because Islamic hate is more just like the cultural trappings. So there's not a problem with, like, let's say Farsi, like one of the Guru's poets wrote in Farsi.
Sure.
But
India. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I think one of the things, like, there's some who say Sikhi is an Indo-Abrahamic religion, and I just don't understand that, because I think there are some similarities seemingly, in the sense that, okay, Sikhs don't, worship idols. And even the Guru, he mentioned this, Sikhs, the 10th Guru mentioned this in his, that Sikhs don't worship idols. And Sikhs, that's a very strong part of Sikh belief that is similar to Islam. But if you dig down, the reason is very different. Like, the reasoning for not worshiping idols in Islam is shirk. It's insulting to Allah if you worship. For Sikhs, it's not insulting. It's like it's more of like, okay, what is the purpose of this? And so the idea of one Almighty, it's similar. It seems similar. And I guess when Sikhs were engaging in talks with Muslims, they would even historically, they would make reference to how these are similar concepts, but it's not quite the same, because the how Allah is in Islam is very different than how it is in the Sikh context. And one thing I would point out is that I think there were at that time specifically and later in history, there were some Muslims who shared a similar vision of how the divine. So Mian Mir was one of the close affiliates of the fifth Guru. There's Pir Buddhu Shah. He actually gave his sons to fight for the 10th Guru. So there were definitely those who had a similar syncretic vision of the faith, but it's not in the sense. I think the problem is that when people think of mainstream, what's mainstream Islam today, let's say Pakistan,
Sure.
the differences are, the similarities are, I mean, they're not as, they're superficial. Yeah, one God, no idols. Okay, cool. But there's not like a strong, there's a conflation of Islamic hate with Islamic.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's funny to me because, like, it's for me, I don't see really outside of like terms like you indicated. I don't see anything particularly, actually, nothing Islamic about Sikhism in that sense. It's very dharmic. It's taken a very. Look, I mean, there are trends within various dharmic faiths that they don't actually have murtis, right? Like even the concept of murti worship is relatively came in the middle of probably the tradition within India, right? Like murtis come about to like second or third century BC.
Yeah.
Right? Well before that, they didn't have murtis. It was yajna ovens. And a lot of people, a lot of traditions, like for example, I think like the Nath sects, some of them don't even do any murti worship. They focus on Nirguna Brahman. And you have, even I think like even the Lingayats really don't have like temples that way. And there's various traditions that were well before Islam and that's still maintained, no murti, no, focusing on like Nirguna and to me, like just the way the Sikhi practices, from what I can tell, is very dharmic. It's just that they just taken the concepts that they thought are more important.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's one other thing you could say. It has a similarity, but it's like the initiation ceremony. So I think that's something that's, in the idea of Christianity or even Islam where you convert. Because,
well, I mean, like if you enter any sampradaya, even within the Hindu tradition, there's an initiation ceremony. Usually involves water. It might involve some sort of getting a mantra. Like for example, like when you become within a certain community within every tradition actually, to be initiated into a mantra, you have to have certain ritual done, like water, eat something particular, passed down from guru to the shishya. There are initiation ceremonies across every culture, I think.
Yeah. So that's what, like, even prior to the Khalsa, there was an initiation ceremony of Jarampaho.
Yeah.
But I think the Khalsa, what one analog is that once someone becomes a Khalsa Sikh, they become part of that third month. So they forego so remember we were talking about, I guess, the duality that was present before. So like once someone becomes a Khalsa Sikh, and so Sikhs today who are like, identify Sikhs, they're basically the descendant of the Khalsa Sikh. So you can so people, it's really weird when people say you convert to Sikhi, because like, how do you convert to Sikhi, right? Like, because a Hindu could just read the Guru Granth Sahib and they could just continue to be a Hindu. Yeah. But when people usually say convert to Sikhi, that means taking the initiation and becoming a Khalsa Sikh. Because once you become a Khalsa Sikh, you are then, it is its own society unto itself. There's the saying that, the Khalsa blends the four castes into one. It is its own social envision. It is a Tisara Panth. And so that's a concept that I think it's analogous structurally to Islam, but I wouldn't say it's Islamic, if that makes sense.
What it seems to be similar to me is the concept of much of the ascetic traditions that within the Indian sampradayas have. The Dharmic sampradayas, right? To become a certain ascetic, you have to wear certain clothes, you have to do certain things with your hair, you have to do an initiation. But those are ascetic traditions, right? Like if you were to enter like a Advaita ashrama or Ramanta ashrama, whatever it is, you become the particular community, you follow you get initiation into it, and then you're separated from the rest of the community around you in some sense. But I feel like in the Sikhi tradition, it's still their householder tradition, right? Like you like with Nanak, right? Which is ultimately his perspective. which is interesting because do you have a tradition within Sikhism that is ascetic at all?
Yeah, so the Udasis were ascetic, and I guess there's a Nirmala tradition. So they're not like explicitly ascetic, but they were the ones they would do a lot of the exegeses of Sikh texts. So they were very learned in Sanskrit.
Sure.
They were Benares, and they would learn Sanskrit and all these. They would learn Vedanta, and they would interpret Sikh texts through the lens of Vedanta. And some were actually initiated in the Khalsa, some were not. There's a spectrum on that too.
Right.
But so I guess you can also refer to them as ascetic in a sense. But the Khalsa is taken to be that is also one of it's a family I guess life in leading.
Sure. Now we briefly touched on this, but can you be Sikhi without being Khalsa?
Yeah. So you can be a Sikh without being Khalsa. The term for that traditionally was Sahajtari,
Okay.
which meant it means either slow. Sahaj means slow or wise. Tari means so the term Tari means someone who adorns something. So the word for Khalsa Sikhs is usually Amritari.
Yeah.
The word for Sikhs today who keep I'm not Amritari, but I keep my case is Tari. But so traditionally Sahaj Tari Sikhs. So they were the ones who followed Sikhi.
Yeah.
But they didn't follow the Khalsa religious sort of dominatory worldview, and this included a lot of Hindus in Punjab, a lot of Khatris especially.
Yeah.
So there's one, and they actually, a lot of them were able to help the Khalsa when they were sort of in conflict with the Mughals, because they shaved, they ate halal, they smoked. These are things that are forbidden for the Khalsa Sikhs.
Yeah.
But they were able to, get in the Mughal administrations, and they were able to sort of act as a midway person. They were very pro-Sikh, pro-Khalsa.
Yeah.
They would have a lot of respect towards the Khalsa, but they were not Khalsa themselves. And they wouldn't take the name Singh, so Gauramal. And then the other tradition, so the other main, I guess, Sajdar tradition is the Rawabis. So these are guys, they would do kirtan. So they're the descendants of Mardana, the first Sikh ever. So they're kind of Muslim, but they're also Sikh, because they identify as Muslim, but they actually know the kirtan. They perform the kirtan. They have a lot of Sikh practices. So they're, I guess, part of that syncretic tradition.
Do they worship in Gurdwara too, or do they go to masjid?
So they worship in Gurdwara too.
Okay.
So that tradition is kind of, with the partition, that tradition kind of has gone, because they were kind of stuck there. So they all stayed in Lahore. So actually, I managed to meet one when I went to Lahore.
Mm-hmm.
The descendant of he was just in the Gurdwara. He was chilling. He was very happy to meet fellow Sikh, and but there's a lot of research going on too about how their tradition is changing, because now the dominant, more orthodox Islam is taking over. These Sikh traditions are sort of being lost, and there's some researchers who are trying to bring their Rababis back, bring some of their traditions back into it.
So here's the question. I mean, how does it work in the Gurdwaras? Right? Is there a priestly group or a group? I mean that in a very loose sense, right? The person that leads the kirtans, that does any rituals. What is that breakdown within the Gurdwara?
So the Gurdwara is the Granthi is the caretaker. So he takes care of the Gurdwara, takes care of the Guru Granth Sahib. Also the Gyani is the wise man who so these aren't, I guess they're like a priestly class.
Sure.
But they're not specifically these are people who, they have normal jobs and all. They have normal, I guess they're married and whatnot.
Yeah. But how are they chosen? How do they get there? Is it just
so there's no official training. So it's just historically it was just revered saints and all who would just take over. So technically any Khalsa can be this, take this path. And in the colonial area, what happened is there were a lot of call it Sikh missionary colleges. Missionary doesn't mean Christian,
sure.
Sikh colleges that would educate Sikhs in this, in Sikhi and all that, and they would become a Paisab or Granthi or Gyani, and they would caretake a Gurdwara and all that.
But within like even the Golden Temple, right? Is that hereditary? The people that take care of the Guru Granth Sahib actually there and manage that, or is that
So,
again?
so in the way the Golden Temple, so there are there's 5 takhts, which are like 5 centers.
Mhm.
The Kal Takht, Keshgarh Sahib, Hazur Sahib, Patna Sahib, and Damdama Sahib.
Mhm.
So all of these have jathedars who are appointed. So it's like I guess it's a meritocracy in a sense.
Okay.
It's always been that way, and the caretakers are basically, I think they're employees of the what is now the overseeing body, the SGPC. So they're like employees, I guess.
Okay.
And they're not like a special. I mean, there's not like special deference offered to them. They're just people there to caretaking and all.
Now, is there any particular rituals that are followed by the community?
By the community? Oh,
Yeah.
In Gurdwaras, there's like a lot followed by the community. So like, there's offering of prasad, and there's arda. So after kirtan, there's usually there's a reading of the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the Hukamnama. So it's randomly turned to a page. Someone reads it. Sometimes a Granthi or someone from the congregation. I've done it. There's also the offering of the prasad, the Kada prasad, amongst the congregation. There's the ardas, which is read, which recounts the history of the Sikh tradition and praise for the contemporary, good well-being of the contemporary Sikh Panth. And there's the langar held. So, and all of these have associated like there's associated rituals in the sense that like when when the Guru Granth Sahib is taken out, we fan the Guru Granth Sahib with a Jodh as a sense of respect, and when it's taken out, we bow down to it out of reverence. And so so there are these small
I mean, it's that's similar to what happens with murtis too, right? In the Hindu tradition, they're fanned, and then when they go for what's known as utsava, which is like kind of like going out into the community, or taken out of their resting place, they're treated in a similar differential manner, right? I mean, again, like the term idol itself is very, to me, doesn't make sense, because we're not actually, even for the Hindus, right? We don't think of it as the thing in itself is inherently divine. It's the divinity is summoned into it. Now we have some variability here. Certain murtis aren't considered inherently divine, which would be like what's known especially in the Hindu communities as Swayambhu or whatever, which is self-manifested. But yeah, it'd be similar to what would happen to the Guru Granth. Now, what is the role of women in the rituals and the practice in Sikhi?
There's no specific role, but there's no, they have the same access as men.
Like, could they do the reading of the kirtan? Can they?
Yep.
And can they do everything that the males can do within like Vida Jnani there or
Yep.
Oh, okay.
They can, yeah. I mean, there's some people who like to say like, oh, there's some voices who are like against it, but the overwhelming consensus and the historical consensus is that women have the equal access. So one of the greatest Sikh warriors of all time, he was actually found by Justice Singh Aluwale. He was actually found by a Khalsa army contingent because him and his mom used to just sing kirtan and do it across Punjab at the time.
No, but women can't become part of the Khalsa, can they?
Yeah, they can.
How would they do that?
So they take Amrit and they become, so they don't become Singhs, they become Kaurs.
Gors, okay. And but do they still have to carry around like the kirpan and this?
Yep, they do. So the only difference is that women, so a lot of Sikh women, especially now, are starting to wear the turban.
Mm-hmm.
For men, the turban is like it's pretty much you have to wear the turban. For women, traditionally they would either wear a turban or they would cover their hair with a chunni.
So for men, you have to wear a turban, or is it just covering your head? Like just keep it covered.
So this is something that's like debated. So you're technically just supposed to cover your head, but like you're supposed to technically cover your head. So the basic requirement is you're supposed to cover your head for men and women. but most men will like wear a turban. I mean, you'll see some of these kids, they have that, like, if you see like the little ball thing.
Yeah.
So that's not like a full out turban. That's like, but it's still considered appropriate. Like, and but yeah, in the traditional, I guess, in traditional Sikh culture historically, men would cover their hair with turbans. Some women would wear turbans, but most wear the chunnis. So that's how
But
my. But
but
so like they are initiated. So there's initiated Sikh women in my family. So they also keep a kirpan on them. They have a kada on them. They follow all the rites.
but but one of the 5Ks isn't keeping a turban, right? It's just keeping long hair.
Keeping uncut hair, yeah.
Yeah, so uncut hair. So then can you still? I mean, do you have to have a turban, or you just have to keep your hair uncut?
So you have to keep your hair. So okay, so you keep your hair uncut, but part of that is also you comb it and you regularly clean for it. So it's like the mandatory thing is you don't cut your hair or your beard.
Right.
But
if you were to like keep it in a nice ponytail, well kept, would that still be considered okay, or no?
So like no, I mean, so that's not like when you go to a gurdwara, you have to keep it in a turban, or like
Right.
you have to keep it covered.
Well, everyone has to keep their head covered anyway.
Yeah. But so I mean, there's some Sikhs who do. I mean, even I, like right now, I'm not wearing a turban. Sometimes I go out, but usually it's considered like you should. It's like it's not as like if it's like something where like if you cut your hair, that is the moment, where you like breach the code of conduct. But if you don't wear a turban, it's not like you're breaching the code of conduct. But
Sure.
you're like it's like that's a strong recommendation. You keep a turban on your head.
And so is there an excommunication or anything like that if you cut your hair and you're?
Yeah. So if you cut, so there's two things. So there's one is called patit. So if you break the 4 budget grades, which are the sort of key core principles, which is having an extramarital affair, sexual relations, extramarital, smoking the hookah or tobacco, eating halal meat, or cutting your hair, you are a patit, which means you are like you're basically you're fallen. So to be reinitiated, to become a Khalsa again, you need to be reinitiated. And excommunicated is there's a thing called tankhaya, which is this is reserved for like people who have done
heinous things,
individuals who have done like heinous crimes, or like so this is something that's agreed upon by a bulk majority of Sikhs. They're excommunicated in the sense that there's a social boycott put on them. So like other Khalsa Sikhs are not to talk with them.
Okay.
That's like political. That's more of a political thing. Yeah.
Now, from dietary stance, there's like you said, you can't eat halal, but you can have jetka, right?
Yeah. So I mean, this is controversial because a lot of Sikhs, especially in the modern age, there's big controversy because a lot of Sikhs believe that you should be vegetarian, lacto-vegetarian.
Yeah.
So that's what they believe. Like, but the traditional thing was that, Sikhs do not eat halal, but because they procure their meat either through hunting or through chatka, which is the one swipe cut, and that's
it. So it's also interesting because I know you're saying modern Sikhs, but I've known a few older Sikhi men, especially in the time when I was in Delhi, I lived there, that were totally vegetarian, right? They wouldn't eat any sort of meat, and they weren't lacto-vegan, but they would, because like milk is such a big product within all Indian culture, but they just wouldn't eat meat, and they thought it was actually antithetical to Sikhism to have meat. But there's apparently a lot of not controversy, but conversation around the role of meat within Sikhism.
Yeah, so it was like, so there was a period. So there has always been some Sikh sects who have been vegetarian, lacto-vegetarian like that.
Yeah.
Langar is also lacto-vegetarian, so you won't find meat served in the Sikh temple. But like it's sort of, now there's more historical awareness because around I would say like even 10 years ago, if you said, Sikhs can eat meat, like theologically, that would make it huge, there'd be a huge uproar. It was a very common belief that Sikhs could not eat meat in the 80s, 90s. Like my father growing up, he was initiated Sikh. He ate meat because he was very like into the research. He researched a lot of the history about it. And like a lot of other Sikhs were like, why are you eating meat? Like a lot of, because he was the only one he knew at the time in Punjab, which is like a big thing. But like now there's more historical awareness. People are going to the roots of it, the historical texts. They're seeing the traditions maintained by the Nihangs, who are like a traditional warrior group who have maintained a lot of the old traditions that were otherwise lost.
Yeah.
Okay, the restrict, even when my father, like everyone knows that halal is especially banned, but like, but yeah. So this is a new thing that's arising, this consciousness of meat, chatka meat eating. Like chatka,
Right.
if you said the word like 10 years ago among a lot of Sikh circles, they'd be like, that's a BS word. But now there's like awareness of it happening.
And then you can't, like you said, you can't smoke any sort of tobacco.
Yeah.
And then no alcohol, from what I understand, also.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, alcoholism is pretty, or not alcoholism, but alcohol for a lot of Indians and Sikhs included is part of their lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a part. So it's an interesting duality, I guess.
Yeah.
Where alcohol is sort of banned. I mean, so tobacco and smoking is particularly like very strongly admonished.
Right.
Alcohol is also banned, but it's, I guess, not as culturally prohibited. There's a lot of like varying historical reasons, I guess, for that.
Sure.
But yeah, so it is this interesting duality, I think, where it's technically prohibited, but a lot of Sikhs do end up drinking.
Right.
They're known for they have that reputation and all. But
that's right.
But that's why the more religious, like the sants and all, like a lot of the like, that's why a lot of what they do is a lot of their appeals are to get the youth or to get people to stop drinking and stop these vices that are otherwise, what they consider vices that are otherwise present amongst Sikh populations.
Sure. So, and I guess I'll just have a few more questions. I know we've been going for a while, but just a couple more questions, and then I know it's late and you got stuff to do. So, in the philosophical side, does the Sikh philosophy have a sort of creation process? Is it like from like in terms of Samkhya yoga, like from Purusha Prakriti, and then if you know this coming down to like the great elements and then the gunas, do they have their own kind of creation cycle, or is that kind of just left ambiguous so you can take whatever you want?
So that's kind of, I guess it's not like a strong part of the theology, because the philosophy is focused more on practice than it's like orthopraxic more than orthodoxic.
Okay.
But like traditionally Sikhs believe in like metaphysics. A lot of Sikhs would, I guess, believe in traditional dharmic metaphysics, at least in terms of like rebirth, which is like the rebirth cycle.
Sure.
And that. But in terms of creation process, that one, I think there's some mention in Gurbani about it, but it's also taken a more literary review. That's not like it's not a pressing concern for
sure.
Per se.
And, I mean, and do they have their own kind of understanding of like how reincarnation and karma works, or again, is that kind of left ambiguous?
So reincarnation is, it's done. The cores are the same. I think the one thing is that it is believed that karma is not like, it's not, it doesn't apply. It applies to the human level. Mm-hmm. So like the lakjun, like the multiple lives you get to have a human life, it's applicable at the human level, not just any human, regardless of caste or whatever, is attainable, is potentially able to attain that salvation, not just one group. But so, I mean, that might vary. I mean, I know there's a lot of Hindu traditions that also have that view.
Yeah, all Hindu traditions have that view. And the only demarcation would be the more orthodox ones would say that the Vedas and Upanishads are restricted to the Brahmana, Vaishya, and Kshatriya groups, but everyone is open to moksha. Now, this is actually like interesting. I mean, if you care, this is a conversation within Advaita Vedanta of Shankara, which he believes that women probably don't achieve moksha because women and Shudras because of that. But that's most of the other traditions have a different viewpoint, which anyone can receive moksha or mukti based upon studying other scriptures, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas, and following a certain praxis, right?
Yeah.
So that way it would be very similar. Now, what is the view of how people even, or how beings got caught up in this samsara of sorts?
Like the
And what's the
origin of it?
purpose? Sorry?
The origin of it, or
Yeah, what's the do they postulate an origin, or do they say what the purpose of this entire cycle is? And like, and so I mean, like in the Hindu context, we could call it a lila. Like we have a sense of nirguna Brahman, but that nirguna Brahman is viewed and becomes saguna through Maya. But in fact, all beings are already free. They just have to recognize it. Is that what the viewpoint of the Sikhs would be?
yeah. So I guess so. The Sikhi view is that there is Paramatma, which is basically the great, the divine, and so the view is that each individual has an Atma,
Yeah.
and the only way to merge the Atma with the Paramatma is through the human life, in which you can do spiritual meditation and all that sense to get that merging. So I'm not sure if that's similar.
Well, I mean, so I guess the question would be is, again, this is like, these are the philosophical, ontological differences between the various schools in India. I mean, in Hindu thought, like, is Paramatma and Jivatma the same? Are they different? Is it only illusory difference, or is it real difference? I mean, so when you say merge, like within the Sikhi tradition, does that mean that your Atma retains its individuality, or is that individuality a product of Maya? I mean, so those are like,
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Individualities. So I'm not like that well versed on philosophy of that sorts, but I know what you're referring to.
yeah,
The individuality is an illusion in this context.
okay,
It is an illusion of Maya, because in reality, the Atma, so attaining mukti of some sort, breaks away the illusion of the duality, I guess. I if that makes sense.
that makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, but these are like the issues that what that duality means is very important within the Indian philosophical context, right?
No, yeah, and I think there are texts that, this is one thing that I probably want to get into more later on. There are texts that engage with this in great detail, and they actually do use Vedanta concepts. So a lot of these
Right.
intellectuals, they use Vedanta concepts to even contextualize these philosophical ontological questions. But
Yeah,
I haven't really engaged with them in great depth.
no, I'm very interested because of the Bhakti movement, right? Within that was playing around at the same time as Nanak. How much of, like, either the Bhakti movement from the South and their philosophical ideas influenced Nanak and the philosophy of Sikhism, or did it become much more Advaitic in how it approached the philosophy? What I mean by Advaitic, because I mean like Shankara's Advaita, not necessarily.
Yeah. No, I mean, so that one, I probably can't give you the best answer for, because
Okay.
I mean, these are terms like I've come across, but I've never really done a deep dive into, because I know some of my friends who are, they're very versed in this kind of stuff, and they're very interested in this kind of stuff, and they do actually read those texts,
Right.
The Advaitic texts and all, to contextualize. It's just maybe something I'm not as familiar with.
Sure. Now, and just a final question here before we end. What is the relationship within Sikhism between what they would see as the Vedic texts, the Puranas, Mahabharata, the Vedas, and their tradition? Is it supplementary, or is it just not looked at all?
So the view held is that the gurus often wrote that what the Vedas is, it's a continuous stream of thought to the Guru Granth Sahib. What the Guru Nanak said was, all that can be found in the Vedas can be found through the teachings of the Guru. So that is the Sikh view. So the Sikh view is that someone who's reading the Vedas, someone who's interpreting the Vedas, versus someone who's reading the Guru Granth Sahib, they're on the same path. But for Sikhs, it's like, it's not like the Granth is a supplementary text to the Vedas. It's like the Granth is the distilled form, I guess, the crystallized form of what's essential for Sikhs to read from the Veds, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And
but a lot of Sikhs do. I mean, so a lot of Sikhs do, though. even that's something I'm trying to get to. They've historically, read the Veds to supplement their
Yeah.
view of. So that was a part of the Nirmala teaching and all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess my final question would be, how do the Sikhs view other traditions? Do they think that other traditions can have mukti following their path, or is Sikhi the path the way to mukti only?
So this is, so I think the Guru said, it's an interesting question, because the Guru definitely delineates, like, there's some things that he says will not get you mukti. Like he said, if you just blindly do this ritual, right, then you will not attain mukti through blindly doing this ritual. But there is the idea of, like, the fact that mukti is not tied to the Sikh spiritual tradition alone, right? So some of these differences between, like, Sikhism and different philosophical traditions, they're not different in saying that, oh, Sikhs alone get mukti. They're differences in the sense that, okay, the Sikhs believe that this is the more efficient way to get mukti, while also, like, so for example, the yogis thing. I don't think the Guru is actually saying that that's one of the key points, I think, in Siddh Ghosh, in his dialogue with those yogis, is that he's not saying that yogis won't get mukti. He's saying that, okay, this ascetic lifestyle isn't needed for mukti.
Right.
So you can also get mukti through living this household life. So that's the contention. That's, like, there's a lot of, so there's also a dialogue with the Guru. So a lot of the differences it's not in the sense of, like, an Abrahamic sense where, like, if you follow this, you will not get it. But it's like, these are philosophical differences, but they're more like differences in methodologies and practices than, different than, like, a different, okay, if you don't follow this worldview, you are doomed. Even the concept of Tisra Panth, right? The view isn't, if you're not part of the Tisra Panth, you are nothing. It's more of, okay, this is the third path. This is what Sikhs believe to be the best path. This is what Sikhs follow. But Sikhs at the time, they also had dialogues with other groups, because there is the belief that,
Right.
you don't have to follow the Sikh religious worldview specifically to get mukti.
So sorry, I have one last question, then we'll end it. What do you think are the big challenges right now facing the Sikhi community in terms of either practice or theology or just their existence? What do you think is really the issues that are affecting the community that way?
I think one big thing is that, Sikhs, I think right now, Sikhs in the West, we're hitting a point in which the mainstream, where we've distilled our religion as sort of just being, our religion, Sikhism, is just be a good person, It's just, we believe in all the, if you're a Muslim, be a good Muslim. If you're Hindu, be a good Hindu. We believe in all religion. We're just, we love giving free food. These very, like, these sort of, I want to say, it's like tasty tidbits for,
Right.
like the secular humanitarian paradigm. And so I think Sikhs, the biggest challenge, one of the biggest things to me, is Sikhs need to start, engaging with the faith on a more deeper level, right? Like asking these sort of questions. I think, questions that challenge, not just the standard, like, okay, if the Guru really said, if you really didn't believe in, like, having, in creating, why would there even be a need for a new religion,
Right.
or religious ideology? So I think that's one of the big issues. And that from that, there's a lot of stuff that spills over. Like there's, like Sikhs, for example, like one thing is absurd is that Sikhs really saying Sikhs don't believe in converting other people, which is true in the sense that we don't believe in, like, converting people, like going out and saying, okay, please, like, convert.
Yeah, proselytization.
Yeah,
Right.
Proselytization. But there is a Sikh view of Prachar, which means, like, Sikhs, like, they go out and they want to teach others about Sikhi. They want others to embrace the views of Nanak if it so suits them. Because, like, I saw, like, one day someone was saying, like, he went to a Gurdwara to learn about Sikhi, and someone told him, oh, don't go here. Just follow your own religion. Just be a good person. It's like, what? Like, and I guess, that I think the biggest problem is that Sikhism in the modern time is that it's just become a Punjabi ethnic faith, when in reality it's this philosophy that appeals to a lot of, even the Khalsa is a social order that can appeal to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds.
Right.
And Sikh philosophy can appeal to even have a broader reach outside of the Khalsa. So these are some of the things I would think, just redefining what we think of this.
Yeah, I mean,
simplistic narrative. Otherwise, simplistic narrative.
I think, I mean, that's something I've noticed with the community is it's a very Punjabi Jat focus right now, as opposed to large. And to be honest, most of the Sikhis that I've known don't know anything close to what you've even talked about. They just have, they just follow. They're again, maybe this is because the focus is very much on praxis as opposed to like knowledge within the larger community, which I did many ways. Hindu community is very much also at fault too, right? Because we do the same thing. We just know you do this puja, you do that puja, you go to this temple, and you're good. As opposed to having a larger, or not a larger, but a more intimate relationship with the tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, is there anything you think that we missed or you want to say before we close out?
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This was a pretty good talk, and I will definitely be hitting you up more as I want to learn more about other religious traditions too, to sort of just expand my own knowledge. I love like learning these little. I think this is a good example of exactly what I was saying earlier, where like Twitter is good for the networking, but now there's a need to go beyond the Twitter, and so I love the conversation. I would definitely
I learned so much, man. I mean, there's so much I don't know, like about Sikhism. I probably know just as much as an average Sikhi about their tradition in like large chunks. But I really want to get into like the nitty gritties of how they view the world and how they view the tradition and how they like their philosophy, because 500 years of existence must build a wealth of knowledge and ideas, and it's probably super fascinating, and I want to learn more about it.
But yeah, no, and I would love to talk in the future, and I really enjoy this opportunity.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Let's keep in touch, and we'll have you back on sometime, and we'll go forward.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
And be safe, dude, and you and your family be safe during the coronavirus.
Yes, be safe. Yeah.
And keep all that. Hopefully your parents are doing well. And
yeah, we celebrated Vaisakhi at home, so
good.
Yeah, but
happy belated Vaisakhi.
पावन मुनि जन यमुना तीरे पावन मुनि जन यमुना तीरे गायति वनमाली गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली